Welcome into the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Have a very interesting show today, folks. You know, when we first started this segment, it'll be, oh my gosh, now I have to count back. 12 years ago, True Crime Tuesday started. We had a goal in mind. That goal was to marry the paranormal and true crime. Well, folks, I have a third thing that's been thrown in over the years, and that's this. When you've contacted me over the years, you've said to me, Tim, you know what? I'm going to be in your town. What kind of things can I see when I'm in your town? What kind of paranormal tours can I take? What kind of true crime tours can I take? What sites can I see that I can connect myself, not only to the show, but to these real life things that you're talking about on the show? And a lot of times I'll scratch my head and go, oh God, and I'll stammer a lot. That'll happen. And then I'll find a couple of things and say, well, you can do this, this, and this. And I'll feel bad because I feel like I've let you down because let's face it, I've got a lot of things to do here on the show. But on top of that, I feel like I'm woefully inadequate to bring you a lot of the things you can do or even put them together in a nice little suggestion or tour for you to do when you're in my city, much less any other city in the nation, because a lot of you do ask me about other cities in the nation, and I have traveled quite a bit. I ramble on for this reason. I have a guest today that's managing to put together an entire series of these exact same tours. Not only that combine true crime, but also a paranormal aspect as well. Folks, when I saw that this book is soon to be available, I busted. It was like, oh my God. And I had to get a hold of a copy of this. And I had to first of all read it and then get this guest onto the show and talk about this book that's out here soon in just a few weeks. It's available for pre-order, by the way. It's called Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide. And it focuses this first one on the New England area. Our guest today is Dawn Barclay. And I tell you, she's put together a heck of a book. I got a chance to read an advanced copy of it over the weekend. And boy, oh boy, am I impressed. I'll tell you a little bit about the format here when we bring Dawn on in just a moment, but I'll tell you this much. I don't think I've ever read a more comprehensive guide on how to get you into an area or a city, a state, and not only give you the highlights, both true crime and paranormally, of the area and specific areas and specific highlights, but also she takes you on a complete tour. She tells you how to get around the city. She tells you which highlights to hit. And she does it expertly. And I've got to tip my hat to Dawn as to exactly how she gets you around these areas. And we'll talk about it here in just a second. Let me tell you a little bit about Dawn, and we'll bring her on. Dawn Barclay, who writes fiction as DM Bar, has been writing in the travel field for decades, first as a travel trade journalist and later as a book author. She is the 2023 Lowell Thomas Gold Award-winning author of the Autism Travel Bible, Traveling Different: Vacation Strategies for Parents of the Anxious, the Inflexible, and the Neurodiverse. Dawn also won the first prize Other Writing Award from the Society of the Professional Journalists in 1992. For a story on travel law. Vacations Can Be Murder, her multi-volume travel crime travel series with Level Best Books, combines the two things that she loves the best, of course, after chocolate and dogs. And we commend her for that as well. We love that here as well. Travel and crime. Those are the two things that she loves the most after that. Along with being an author of psychological suspense, she's a member of the Society of American Travel Writers, the American Society of Journalists and Authors, the New York Travel Writers Association, and several mystery writers organizations. Let's welcome in for the first time to True Crime Tuesday, Dawn Barclay. Dawn, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm exhausted after hearing all that. But thank you for the wonderful intro.
Well, thank you for being here. There's so many places where we can start, but let's start here. First of all, thank you for putting our chocolate and our peanut butter. We appreciate that, and combining travel, paranormal and true crime, because we managed to do it quite a while ago and we thought we were crazy for doing it. And we're glad that other people now have done it and enjoy it as much as you can enjoy the two subjects of crime and death. But that there's not only an established audience now, because it has been quite a while, but that it's recognized that the two belong together. Let me ask you this question to open, Dawn, and that's this. When did you find out that both interests combined were an equal love and that you wanted to put them in the same book?
Well, the short answer is that I started by including hotels and restaurants that had a crime element to them, like hotels that used to be jails, like the Liberty Hotel in Boston, or there are restaurants that used to be jails where you can eat in a former prison cell, things like that. But there aren't very many. And I needed to enhance that section. And it occurred to me that when souls are not at rest, perhaps murder was involved. And that's how I got the idea to bring in haunted restaurants and hotels, as well as ghost tours to supplement the true crime tours that I include in the book.
Interesting. Okay. So you kind of got there the same way we kind of got there. I
Yeah.
like it. You know,
I needed content.
no, right. It, we kind of got there not only through, we got there through tragedy as well. I think with the theme of the show, I mean, we've had true crime tragedies that have happened to us as well, but we also kind of realize that, you don't get one place without the other, right? I mean, you don't get to the paranormal without going through a true crime element. And it just kind of seemed to us like they should go hand in hand. We thought there should be more paranormal elements to true crime and more true crime to paranormal elements. So we figured natural progression, although you do realize at a time you eventually run out of paranormal elements to true crime and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, I needed to get that book up to 75,000 words. So
That's
it
right.
worked.
That's right. It does work. It does work. But the two together, I mean, eventually when you marry the two together, they do come together and make a nice product.
Yeah, I think that people who are interested in murder are probably interested in death and ghosts as well.
Yeah.
So I
Yes.
think that there's something, I found that there was something for everyone, whether someone was interested in true crime, the paranormal, tombstone tourists who just like to go into graveyards and look at tombstones. There were people who like to travel and see the outside of jails and know who used to be in those jails. It's all falls under the umbrella of dark tourism. And that's really what the book is. I don't include certain things like wartime stories. There's nothing to do with war. I try to keep out politics, and there might be some more political assassinations when I get into other parts of the country.
Okay.
But I try to focus on just those four types of travel. Excuse me.
Because obviously when you go further south, when you get to, and I'm going to bring up a timely topic. Let me bring up the JFK assassination as those files have been released. When you get to, like, say, the Dallas area and talking about Dealey Plaza, things like that, is that something you include in the book?
I will include it, but it won't be yeah, Texas is a weird thing because I've got the feeling when I get to Texas, it's going to have its own book, just the way I kind of feel like Florida will. I knew from the beginning that California would have its own book,
Mhm.
but I have to wait and see when I start writing it how extensive it's going to be. But I don't think I'm going to put more emphasis on political assassinations than I put on anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get it that there's the occasional exception, that you have to occasionally you might have to throw something in there but I also get the no politics deal in there too. We try to stay away from politics on the show as well. It's one of those things.
And
Um,
the other thing I found out is in Boston, I did not really discuss the churches where there might have been defrocked priests because I don't want tourists going into churches for the wrong reasons. So I
well,
left that out.
I noticed that as well. Even though, and the other thing I noticed, um, you deal with Providence, Rhode Island, and I had a guest on a couple of months ago who dealt with the um, let's just say the seedy underbelly of Providence and dealt with the child abuse scandals in Providence. I noticed you stayed pretty much away from that. You dealt with some of the gangster elements in Providence, but you didn't deal with that underbelly. You stayed far away from that. So I applaud you for that as well.
Yeah, there are other states when you get New York there was a lot of child abuse, and I included some of it. It's part of the book that really, really upsets me. I've become sort of a nerd to a lot of this. People think I'm odd that I start laughing about serial killers, but it's, you kind of have to separate yourself from it all
Right.
and look at it objectively. But when children or animals are involved, when I read about somebody who went and shot their family and then they killed the dog, I get really, really more upset because the dog didn't do anything. And I feel that way about children because children and animals can't protect themselves.
Right.
And so that's the thing I have not been able to separate myself from. And a lot of times when I'm looking at websites that include grave sites and then they have the picture of the child that was killed, I start crying.
Yeah.
And so if people say, do you have a heart? Yeah, I do. Even though you say, you wrote this book, don't you have a heart? I do have a heart. And it really comes out when I have to talk about children whose lives ended early.
Yeah. That was actually one of the questions I was going to bring up is I think you and I both have an affinity for animals, a huge affinity for animals. And and before the show, we were talking, you have a rescue. Go ahead and
I
mention.
do. I've had rescues for a while. I had a lovely dog named Phoebe, who was part border collie and part chow and part newfie, who didn't shed and didn't drool. So I really hit the jackpot. And we kidded around that she was so smart she could do calculus. And at the same time, I had Rufus, who was a schnoodle, who was the stupidest dog ever and the sweetest you'd ever find. And I lost them several years ago. And I got Harley, and Harley is half pit and half lab, and she never met anyone who wasn't her best friend. So I've been really blessed with the rescues I've had.
Very nice, very nice. The as you mentioned in the book, it seems like, boy, when you're a psychopath all the way. And like you'd mentioned, it just seems like shooting the dog or getting rid of the dog. I mean, what is up with that?
Yes, leave the dog. Well, unless you're thinking, well, there won't be anybody to take care of the dog, but still, leave the dog alone.
Right.
And still, people are going to write in and say that she doesn't care about the people. I care about the people. Just
Yeah.
really also care about the dog.
Right. Yeah. Like, what's the dog going to do? Call 911? I mean, I'd leave the dog alone. It just, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. That was one of the recurring themes I kept reading about in the book. And I went, why the dog? Leave the dog alone. It didn't make any sense.
Maybe there's a book there, Dogs Killed by Serial Killers.
Oh, that's a topic. I'm telling you, my
Yeah,
friend.
with pictures.
I,
Yeah.
you could put a portion of the proceeds to all animal shelters. Just saying.
Yeah, there's a thought there. If I only had time to eat, I could consider that.
That's true. Um, the the other thing I thought was brilliant, and again, let's give people kind of an overview of what you've done here with this first book, Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide. Is you've taken New England and you've broken it up into states, and then in those states, you kind of take us not only on the true crime journey, but then the paranormal journey. But then you do a wonderful thing here, Dawn, and that is you take and you not only you not only take and give us the true crime side and the paranormal side, and you give us histories, but then you also take and you've set up a literal tour guide, like, hey, you want to go on a true crime tour? Here's where you start. Here's where you finish. So I don't have to do the work. Tell
Yeah,
me where
I think
that
that's the
came from.
most unique part of the book
Yeah.
is that you're not going to find anywhere else. I start with, yes, the states are all broken up, and then I have short summaries of the major crimes. And I look at that as an introduction to people who don't know the true crime stories and sort of a primer for people who do. It's a primer for people who don't and a reminder for people who do. But they're short, and I acknowledge that I'm just summarizing the story. And then I give you books you can read to learn more about each of those stories. And I also include some books of crimes that I don't even have in the summaries, just to be as comprehensive as I can. And then I move into the I think that's when I move into the hotels and the restaurants that you can stay in and eat
Yes.
when you get there, because you got to sleep somewhere and you got to eat. And again, all of this is broken up by city. So there's not, it's all alphabetical. So there's nothing sort of bringing it together. They could be flung in all different parts of the state. And then I am talking about the tours, the ghost tours and the true crime tours. And then I am talking about museums and other attractions that might be of interest. And then I get into where everybody's buried. Um, and then I talk about the prisons, or I think I talk about the prisons before the burial. And then at the end, I include victim resources. So it really is a resource that, God forbid, something happens to you, you'll know where to go for all these different types of crime. And then I create itineraries that bring everything together by breaking the state up into different areas and then making a logical progression that brings all the elements together, which you wouldn't have been able to do just by reading it, because all of that was by city alphabetically.
Yeah. And it's all brilliantly put together. I mean, I'll tell you, I think you're going to just single-handedly stimulate economies in these areas based on one, just based on the fact that you recommend a lot of good places to eat and a lot of great places to stay. But I'll just speak on the paranormal side of things. You're nailing every single haunted place for someone to stay if they want to stay. Um, there are a lot, you have no idea, Don, how many people approach me and go, "Do you know of a good haunted place I can stay? One that no one's ever heard of before." And there were places in here that I was reading that I went, "I've never heard of that one before, really." And I thought, "Ooh, maybe I can get to that one before everyone else does."
Yeah, I don't know that I've got every single one. In fact, I have something at the beginning of the book that sort of says, by the way, I'm going to miss your favorite hotel or your favorite serial killer. If you have one, forgive me, because I like to be as comprehensive as I can, but I'm sure I've missed something. And then there were some that didn't want to be in the book. So if I've left something out, forgive me, but there was probably a reason why.
Well, sure, and I'm sure there's a few that because there are, and we know this, being investigators and stuff, that there are a few that go, no, 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 I don't want the haunted history out there because I don't want people thinking that it's that type of hotel, and I don't want to drive away potential customers. We hear
Yeah,
that all the time, right? But I think those hotels are missing out on a potential cottage industry. They really are.
I do too. I do
Right?
too. To my credit, I did not include in the list of hotels where someone was murdered. If unless like the Hotel Chelsea, yeah, in New York, yeah, you've got Sid Vicious's girlfriend Nancy Spungen was killed there, but it's also haunted.
Yeah,
So I included it for that reason. But I don't say, be sure to stay in this hotel where three people were murdered. It is mentioned later with the address if you choose to stay there, but a lot of these places have closed as well. So if you want to walk and be at the spot where it happened, even though it might not be a hotel now, or it might have been razed to the ground in the case of many houses where there were mass murders, you can still be at that place, because I say it's as close as you can get to true crime while still breathing. And I think there's a certain person who wants to be in those places and feel like they're part of it.
exactly. Um, the other thing I find very interesting is in a lot of these different places. Okay, so you've got not only just the listing of a cemetery where someone's buried, but you got it right down to the plot number. I mean, you don't have to search. A lot of times, uh, like if I want to see the grave of, even if it's a not so famous person or a famous person or someone who might have been killed by a serial killer or a serial killer, I might show up to a cemetery and go, okay, I think I want to kind of sneak in and see if I can find the grave. And it may take you hours to find that person. In some cases, you got it boom, 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 right down to the plot number. Like you're like,
When they're available. There are a lot of times those plots aren't available, and I also apologize for that in the introduction. It's like, I'm only as good as the reference material out there. If they don't give it to me, I can't give it to you. But yeah, I'm pretty anal, so yeah, I tried to get as close as I could to being as comprehensive as possible. There are some cases, of course, where people are cremated, or in the case of Maine, people are buried at sea.
okay,
I didn't see that in other states, but I definitely saw it in Maine. And so I explained that I can only give you where there are graves.
Is it safe to say, or should we put the warning out now, or put the disclaimer out now? Please don't go deface any of these
Of
graves
course,
if you have that information. I mean, you never know what people do with that information, but I mean, the
never
information.
thought even of that. I never even conceived that someone would do that. Although I don't give the exact house numbers of private homes where anything has happened for
Right.
that exact reason. Not that I thought that the houses would be defaced, but I thought that people would be outside gawking. And so I'll give you the block number. You know, if you really cared, you could find the information. I have the information from my research, you could find it, but I didn't want to be the one making the problem. What's interesting, because I'm also a realtor, is that stigmatized properties often go for more than you would imagine because of the stigma. But I didn't want somebody reading this and saying, oh, wait, I didn't realize that my home was the site of a mass killing. Because, you know, as realtors, we don't really emphasize here, you want to see this house
Yeah.
because somebody was killed there. Most times people don't want that, although there is a segment of the population who definitely wants to buy that kind of property.
Yeah. Yeah, there is, just for the notoriety, right?
Yeah.
Um, the reason why I say that is there is again, it's a tiny part of the population, and I emphasize this, Don, tiny part of the population that wants that information strictly because they feel it's in their psyche that they need to take vengeance on someone for someone else, like they have a mat on for society, and that they're the only ones who can avenge an innocent victim, and that they feel like that they can do that by even getting after someone after they've died. And it's a weird psychological tick, is the weirdest way I can put it. Um,
Yeah. I did not hold on just one sec. I did not even think of that. And I will say here, please don't do that.
yeah,
I would also add that I am not the first one to say where these graves are. Anybody can find those locations online. So it's not like I have brought these
right,
locations to the
right.
public's knowledge.
You far from open Pandora's box here. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's just
It's
one
just
of the.
one more thing for me to worry about. Thanks,
Oh,
Tim.
no, no, I didn't mean to worry you there, Don. That's not what I meant to do. I didn't mean to give you nightmares tonight or anything like that, or agita or anything like that. It's just one of the things that we have to. I feel like I have to mention, because it
Yeah.
with our tourism, obviously you do get some different personalities that want to engage in it. I mean, is that fair to say?
I think it's fair. I'm amazed that with my own paranoia, I never conceived that that could happen. I thought of a lot of things that could happen, but I didn't think of that. So thanks. That's one of the reasons I write psychological thrillers, because I already anticipate the most horrible thing that can happen. But it gave me something else.
I'm glad I can add to your lexicon for a future book. I'm here to serve.
Thanks.
I suppose that's a good place as any to take a break. And then
Yeah.
when we come back, I have an interesting story about one of the places in the book. Believe it or
Okay.
not, I was
Cool.
as I was perusing the book, I had I'll just call it as I see it here, kids earmuffs. I had a holy shit moment, and it had to do with a hotel in Rhode Island that we did an event with the TAPS crew, with the Ghost Hunters crew, way back in 2006. And I went, oh, that wasn't a La Quinta the last time I was in it, but it was something else. But it's actually changed hands a few times. But I know exactly where that is. So we'll tell you about it when we come back. And there are so many great locations and so many different places in this book. Again, it's available for pre-order right now. We have a link to it in the description of the program. The book is called Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide. It's a wonderful book, folks. I highly recommend you go in, click the link, pre-order this book. It's fantastic. And again, it's a series that Don's working on. When we come back, we'll talk about that experience in Rhode Island, and we'll talk about some of the other fascinating locations and states that are available in this book that you can learn a little bit about. Don Barclay is the guest. When we come back, that trip to Rhode Island, next on True Crime Tuesday. Welcome back to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guest is Don Barclay. The book is a fascinating one, folks. And again, it answers all the questions you've ever asked me over the years. Where can I take a vacation where I can get either some true crime tourism or some paranormal tourism? And where can I see the hot spots? Don has answered all of it for you. Don Barclay, my guest. The book is Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide. But there's paranormal stuff in here as well, folks. She's covered it all. She's got all your bases covered. She even tells you where to go from beginning to end for a true crime tour or a paranormal tour. It's all in here, every single bit of it. There's even places to stay, good restaurants to eat good food. She's got you covered. So again, it's available for pre-order. The link is in the description of this program. So you're going to want to check it out. So Don, when we left people, I was telling you about a La Quinta Inn in Warwick, Rhode Island. I've never known how to pronounce the name of this town.
Warwick, I think.
Warwick, Rhode Island. In 2006, we were doing an event. It was one of our first events with the Ghost Hunters folks. So it was Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson and Steve Gonzalez. Dave, I believe Dave Tango was a part of the group at that time. And many of the others that were on the show in that first season. And we were staying at what you have listed now as the La Quinta Inn. And I believe there are two rooms you list as being haunted, which they are very haunted. There's also a back hallway, which had an unusual amount of activity, and it led into a stairwell. And we got some things in that back stairwell, which were just freaky. But I tell you, when I saw that La Quinta Inn was listed, I damn near jumped out of my seat and screamed. And I was surprised that somebody had recognized it in a book.
Cool. So did I list what it had been before?
No, you didn't.
I usually have the previous location, what it was, or a lot of times when something is now something different, I'll list what it was and what it is now.
It was the La Quinta by the airport. So
yeah,
but no, it's changed hands so many times. I'm trying to remember what it was when we were there. I don't remember what it was when we were there, but I think it's probably changed hands so many times that it's many national chains I think have been through there. But La Quinta has it.
And a lot of times things have changed even since I wrote the book, because I wrote the book a year ago, and I've tried to update it when I was doing the edits. There were a couple of places that I updated, but what can you do with travel? Things change, and you have the address at least, so you can see what it is now.
But that's one of those books, or one of those entries in the book, excuse me, that you mentioned. You didn't mention if they had a murder or not. I have it on good authority from somebody who worked there at the time that a murder did take place there. So,
okay.
Yeah. So
makes sense. I mean, there's a ghost for a reason.
Right. And yeah, I won't tell the story behind it because I don't know if any of the original workers that were there when it happened. One of the deaths that happened there in one of the rooms was a drug death, but the other one was a murder. So, yeah.
I was surprised by how many hotels had closed since murders had happened there. A lot.
Yeah.
A lot had closed down. And some were very hard to find where they actually were. Like you see them mentioned in the newspaper articles, and then you have to do some detective work to figure out what they are now. Or, sometimes you see in one case, there was a postcard that was online of the hotel from a newspaper from way back, or some archive. And it was a lot of work to try to figure out where it actually was.
Yeah.
And I think it was like a really seedy dive hotel. Yep. You would not have stayed at because people rented by the hour.
Yep. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It was. Yeah. And that's what the employee had told us. In fact, we sat up late one night talking to this employee who had originally worked there when the death. I think when one of the deaths had gone down, they had one of the deaths had happened before they started, but they had got it firsthand from one of the people who had been there when it happened. Uh,
Yeah.
when the murder happened, they were there for the drug death. They were describing the drug death to us, and it was interesting. It was interesting to get firsthand information about what had happened at that hotel. And so because we had gotten a name, I won't say the name, but we had gotten a first name of the person who had died from the drug death. So we had actually gone up and done EVP work for to see if we could make contact with whatever spirit might potentially be there. So it was interesting stuff. I mean, it was a interesting trip. That's for sure. I also
Really?
done on that exact same trip, killed a 1.5 pound lobster in the lobby of that hotel. I mean, I ate it all with potatoes and all. I was very full on the way back to Minnesota. Just saying. So yeah,
Well, I would list lobster up with chocolate and travel and animals as things I love.
there you go. Right, right.
Yeah.
And I mean, in Minnesota, you can't get a good lobster. So
Yes, that's true. That's a shame. You have to go to Maine.
yeah, yeah. So you got to go to the East Coast to get a good lobster. So, but I digress. But yeah, I absolutely popped when I saw that hotel was listed in the book. I mean, you're doing a thorough job when you get the La Quinta at the airport in Warwick, Rhode Island, and you've listed it right there in the book. So I figured if you got that one in there, Don, you're doing your homework. That's for sure.
Thank you.
Um, you have a lot of, I mean, there are a lot of landmarks that people will recognize as well, but there are some kind of off the beaten paths landmarks as well. I want to talk about some of the more well-known ones. Um, let's talk a little bit about Salem, Massachusetts. And when we talk about Salem, you can talk about the true crime side of it, or you could talk about the paranormal side of it. It's funny that they come together, that area
Yeah.
of Massachusetts. You could talk about the witch trials. And when you talk witch trials, you could talk about the law side of it. You could talk about the paranormal side of it. But either way, a fascinating city. Um, when we go to Salem, what should we be looking for?
Well, is there not a wax museum as well as a so you're gonna have to look it up
That's
because
fine.
I wrote
That's
this a
fine.
year ago.
I know
Uh,
I know you had mentioned too. Is it in that area that the Amistad, or is it close?
uh, I think I have Amistad not listed there.
Oh,
I
is it?
think I have it Boston
That's
because of the
okay.
tours in Boston.
Okay.
Um, but the locations, I have a lot of hotels in Salem to stay at, and yeah, books about Salem and tours, a
Mhm.
lot of tours.
Right.
So yeah, you've got me.
That's okay. That's okay.
The Salem Witch Trials Memorial. You have, I know there's a wax museum there, and the Salem Witch Village. So I have all those included there.
Okay. Okay. Um, talking about the different states involved and talking about the different areas, let me ask you this. What's the toughest, or what was the toughest state for you to pull a tour together for?
Vermont,
Vermont?
be, pretty much because there's a lot of cold cases and there's not a lot of crime. And so one of the rules I had for picking where I was going to choose is there had to be a number of different locations involved so that you had some place to go. That's one of the reasons when I did New York, you don't have Central Park included for the preppy killer because it's like some vague area in Central Park. There's nowhere to send you. Whereas Boston Strangler, all of the addresses for all of the apartment buildings were there for me. So it was really easy for me to do. Vermont, a lot of cold cases and not so much crime. Um, so that was interesting. Whereas Massachusetts is definitely the biggest chapter and the longest chapter in the New England guide. I
What?
would say it takes maybe a third of the book.
Okay. What area surprised you as having more crime than you thought you thought they would have?
Probably Massachusetts. I think I did not realize, and I went to school in Massachusetts, and I didn't realize anything. I mean, people think of Boston Strangler and they think of the bombings, but I didn't think of Charles Ponzi, which was actually one of the most
Oh,
interesting parts of the book for me.
yeah.
He's so damn dedicated. He was out between trials and he was down in Florida selling land underwater. I mean, that's dedication.
That is
Uh,
dedication. Yeah.
yeah, so that was interesting. I think also in Connecticut, there was a lot that I didn't realize had happened in Connecticut, and some of it fairly recent. That was interesting. Um, and I know now in Rhode Island, there was a lot of mobster activity that I included. Um, yeah, I mean, different states have different personalities. It's like there's more mass shootings in Pennsylvania for some reason.
Right.
And there seems to be some states, it might have been some states like you were talking about that had more child abuse
Yeah.
or things happening to children. None of it made me particularly happy, but again, I separate myself from it and look at it more like a historian.
Hmm.
And this is a historical document and a reference guide. So yeah, it was I learned all the way through because I did not come into it with a lot of preconceptions. I was not one of those people who studies true crime and reads a lot of it. So I was coming in kind of blank. And I think that's a good thing because then like I said, I didn't have preconceived notions of who I wanted to focus on.
From a paranormal aspect, I take it probably, with the activity up in Salem, I would think maybe what Massachusetts was probably your most active, or what was your most active paranormal state?
Yeah, that was probably it because of Salem and also Fall River
Oh,
for
yeah,
Lizzie Borden.
for Lizzie Borden. Uh,
Yeah.
what was your least active paranormal state? What was the one that was probably the easiest to write about?
Again, I think Vermont had less than anything else. And Vermont and New Hampshire were not particularly active. I mean, I've dug up places, so to speak,
Yeah.
but they were not as much.
Is it just the quiet lifestyle there? Is that why it was, or is
I don't know. I think that when you get to Wisconsin, you're going to have lots and lots of crime, and you think of
oh,
Wisconsin as kind of a sleepy little place, but
oh no.
that could have its own chapter, its own book as well. From what I'm sort of reading ahead.
I tell you what's going to surprise you, Don, about Wisconsin and Iowa. Sleepy doesn't mean sleepy.
Yeah, people have nothing to do; they go around killing people.
That's right. Yeah. They go around killing people, or they go around.
Why am I laughing?
I know. No, it's. I make Ed Gein jokes all the time. Don't worry about it. It's not a. There's humor behind that. There's dark humor behind it. Um, one of my favorite things to do with Wisconsin friends is send them summer sausage and say, "Look, I made people meat for you." So it. No, I'm kidding. Uh, or, or send them a belt and say, "Look, I made something out of your aunt." No, I'm kidding. It's a joke. Uh, it's a bad joke, but it's a joke. Um, they don't like that humor, by the way. Don't ever do that with a friend from Wisconsin.
Oh,
By the way, have you been to, speaking of dark tourism, have you been to Zach Baggins Museum in Las Vegas?
no, I have not.
I highly,
I know it, but I have not been there.
I highly suggest you go. If
Yeah.
yeah, it's well worth it. Well worth it.
You know where I have been? I have been to the Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I've been to the Mother Museum also in Philadelphia, and that was interesting too. And I mentioned both in that, going ahead to the next book that's coming out hopefully in August, those are both covered in that book.
So what areas are you covering now in the book that's coming out in August? So
In
what
August is New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. So that was originally going to be a book with 6 states. And I had to throw out DC and Delaware and Maryland, because there was so much crime just between New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts that I was over the word count that my publisher wanted. So it became Capital Region is going to be its own book. I mean, New York was almost 30,000 words just in that state. I had to leave out the whole western side of the state because there was so much going on between, say, the Capital Region and Albany down to Long Island. And I figured if people come into New York City, those are ways they can go for day tours to either down to Long Island or up to Albany. So that was just, and then if you didn't kill like 5 or 6 people, you didn't get in. I had to make some really hard choices.
Jeez. So you had to have a resume.
There's cannibalism in New York. There's like infanticide. There's just so much horribleness. And I've got it all. So look for that in August. Um,
Hey, okay.
Definitely a grittier book than the New England book. Definitely.
Well, I mean, New England, I think, is a good place to start. You've got plenty here. I mean, you're not lacking for material, that's for sure. And I think you get a nice balance of both the true crime and the paranormal to get people going. I mean, there's a lot of, man, I'll tell you this much, Don, when you sit down to read it and you get the full history, this is not a knock at all. It's like being hit with a fire hose. I mean, there's so much to see. If you're to take a trip to New England, it's perfect. I'll tell you, this book is coming out in perfect time for people to plan late summer, early fall trips. And
Yeah.
you know, and get
It's great for road trips, even for families with older kids that are interested in the paranormal or crime. There are police museums if they're interested in justice. There are courthouses if they're interested in justice. So it's not like you should avoid taking children. I just think older children, and a lot of the ghost tours allow children as well. Sometimes they're 16 and up,
Yeah.
but you have to pick and choose because there's certainly a lot to choose from. But yeah, for road trips, I think it's RV, people in RVs. I think it all would be of interest to them. And yeah, I mean, August, you'll go in for next year.
Yeah.
I'm thinking there'll be 2 a year for the next several years.
Well, there you go. And it's a wonderful series. It's a wonderful series idea. I don't know. Again, I don't know why it hasn't been done sooner, but I think you're not only you're taking on a huge task, but it's a wonderful task you're taking on because it's answering a lot of questions that I've run into. I can't tell you how many times in the last 20 years where someone has asked me this exact same information and you're answering all those questions. All right. So I'm going to ask you this one last question before we leave people today. And that's this. I'm going to have you speculate for me here. What do you think is going to be the toughest state to try and get all this information out of?
California.
Really?
Because there are a lot of lunatics who move to California. I think, I mean, you've got the Manson, you've got so much in California. And I even see that from the eastern states where people ended up traveling to California and committing crimes there. So I think that's going to be rough. I think the western states, I'm going to have to make some decisions because there's going to be a lot of things in the old west, and I'll have to decide how much I'm going to include. But, you know, worst comes to worst, states are going to get their own books. Yeah. And then I'll just keep adding to it and adding to it.
Could there potentially be 2 volumes for California? Would there be that much?
No, I don't. I'm hoping not. I mean, I suppose you could break it up to Northern and Southern California, but I'm hoping that I get it all. I mean, 80,000 words I can go up to. I think I can. There'll be some things that get left out. I mean, I can't include everything as much as that drives me nuts because I'm so crazy about being comprehensive, but some things are going to get left out.
True. Very true. Well, this one's a wonderful one, folks, and a great place to start. And especially, again, if you're looking for a great guide, if you're looking to travel to New England, especially this late summer, early fall, and you're looking for a great way to combine it. And I'll tell you what, this would be a great book. If you're looking to do Halloween in Salem, you'd have a perfect guide. I'm just saying. It's available for pre-order right now. It's called Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide. Don Barclay has been my guest. And again, the link is in the description of the program to pre-order. I highly encourage you to do so. Don, I want to thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. And just a note to your listeners, if you've done a lot of travel like this, I'd love to feature you on the Vacations Can Be Murder blog. You can go to vacationscanbemurder.com to see that blog, but I would be happy to write you up and talk to you about some of the adventures you've had.
Oh, that'd be perfect. Yeah, I encourage you guys to do that as well. Yeah, by all means. Go on the vacations and let Don know about what you experienced and contribute to future volumes. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. So, folks, it's time now for us to, I don't think we can lighten it up any more than we have, but we're going to lighten it up a little bit more. It's time now for us to bring in Jessica Freeburg, and it's time now for Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals.
For more audio and video archives of True Crime Tuesday, intriguing content, and cool swag, check out darknessradioshow.com. Thank you for watching. The executive producer of True Crime Tuesday is Troy Palmer. If you liked today's show, be sure to like and subscribe. And be here tomorrow for Supernatural News with Mally Fox.